But the Biden Justice Department are ignoring all of this precedent. They're ignoring 250 years of executive privilege because their goal is to get Trump, because they fear that they can't beat him on November 5th, 2024. Nathan Wade is clearly lying. They're clearly corrupt here. They've clearly violated their ethical responsibilities as lawyers and prosecutors. There must be accountability here. It's the strongest case they have is the obstruction case against Trump in Mar-a-Lago. But I would argue that there's no obstruction there because you can't obstruct justice for the investigation of non-crimes.
All right, guys, huge week politically. So much to get to. Mike Davis is going to join us in just a second and break down all things legal. And there's a lot. But let's face it, this morning we heard news Ronna McDaniel is going to step down March 8th. Trump's team likely to take over because right now no one's opposing them. South Carolina was this weekend. I talked about it on a live stream last night. Trump got almost 60% to Nikki Haley's 39. She's staying in it, even though the Koch brothers are bailing on her and saying, we're not funding you anymore. Michigan is tomorrow. We'll see how she does there. And then Super Tuesday, a week from Tuesday, big delegates at stake. I think that's going to be the end for her. A lot going on with Trump court cases. We'll bring that in with Mike Davis. The CPAC did a straw poll of vice presidents. It's meaningless, but it's fun fodder to talk about. Interestingly, the top two vote getters at 15% were Vivek Ramaswamy and Kristi Noem. Number 3, Tulsi Gabbard. No, I don't see a Democrat. And then obviously a lot more going down. I tweeted it out if you want to see the full results. And by the way, this Friday, a short-term deal to fund the government, that dries up. There are 4 bills that they have to get done by Friday night if they want the government to stay open or pass another short-term CR. We got a lot of things to talk about this week. Morgan Ortagus will be here, Dave Rubin, Dr. Ben Carson. But today, Mike Davis of the Article 3 Project, he knows all things legal. He was the former chief counsel for nominations at the Senate Judiciary Committee. Let's get into the legal world with Mike Davis. All right, Mike Davis, a big week in your wheelhouse. So much to break down. Like, I don't know. We may have to go 3 or 4 episodes. This could be a Joe Rogan type episode. Unfortunately, the first, if you're watching it, they only give us an hour. Bill O'Reilly, he likes to get his hour in too. So we're going to cover a lot of topics. I want to start with this IVF ruling out of Alabama. The first thing I want to understand is just, if a court in Alabama rules, the way that the media is portraying this is that it affects everybody. How does a ruling in Alabama affect someone like me here in Virginia or somebody in California or Rhode Island?
It's not. It's not going to control anyone outside of Alabama. This precedent is binding in Alabama. And what the Alabama court held is that if you have these embryos, these unborn babies from IVF, you need to figure out how to handle them, whether it's keeping them frozen embryos or just not discarding them, because the Alabama court held that they're life and they are life. And, that's you have to deal with life appropriately.
Right. So it's not outlawing IVF, which is what some of these folks in the media are claiming.
Yeah, and it's not outlawing IVF at all. It's just saying that if you create life by creating these embryos through IVF, you can't just throw them down the toilet.
Okay. President Trump and others, the NRSC, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, everybody's urging everybody to put out a statement. And again, I get this is a little out of your wheelhouse because you're a lawyer, not a communicator per se. But isn't this sort of people reacting more to the media than necessarily the legal piece of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the left is going to use this as an excuse. Planned Parenthood, the monopolist in the abortion industry, is going to use this to make their Democrat puppet politicians jump and, tell them, if you don't jump, we're going to cut off your campaign contribution. So, of course, the Democrat puppet politicians of Planned Parenthood are going to jump.
Yeah. Hey, folks, during a time of crisis, are you going to be prepared? When I was White House press secretary, we spent a lot of time going through contingency operations and making sure that we were ready in an emergency. The question is, will you be? You will be, though, if you go to 4patriots.com/Spicer. Get the Patriot Power Generator 2000X to make sure that when the power goes out, whether it's an hour or a day or even a month, you will be ready. You will be able to plug in your TV, your computer, your phones, your medical devices, and yes, even your refrigerator. The beautiful thing about the Patriot Powder Generator 2000X is it runs off a solar panel, and that solar panel comes with it for free. So during a time of crisis, you will have the power that you need. The Patriot Power Generator is portable too. You can bring it in your house. And unlike a gas-powered one, you have to worry about filling and refilling. The Patriot Power Generator has no fumes and no noise. You can keep it in your kitchen if you wanted to power your refrigerator. You can put it in your car if a friend or a neighbor needs help. But during a crisis, during an emergency, this is what you're going to need. Get ahead of the curve. Be ready for yourself and your family by getting the Patriot Powder Generator 2000X. Go to 4patriots.com/Spicer now. It's just funny to me because as a non-lawyer, I was like, hey, wait a second, this is an Alabama ruling. And yet it dominated every Sunday show, asking every guest how they were going to handle it. And I would have just said, well, I don't live in Alabama. But this is their issue. I get it. If you're in the media or on the left, like it's all about abortion. It's all about taking the one issue that shifts the focus away from Joe Biden and this horrible domestic and international record and says, okay, let's put Republicans on defense. Even though, frankly, I mean, Trump and everyone else puts out a statement saying we want, even Mike Johnson, who's a hardcore Catholic, puts out this statement saying, we support IVF, and yet everybody's freaking out because of this one ruling in Alabama. And just out of curiosity, when a court like this rules in Alabama, is that the final say, or does somebody maybe who was going through IVF have the ability to appeal to a higher court?
You could go from the Alabama Supreme Court to the U.S. Supreme Court, but I would say this, there's not a constitutional right to have an abortion. These decisions are going to be made by the states. It's our federalist system. If you don't like the laws of Alabama, move to a different state. Remember, in the last election, we saw Democrats win in the deepest of red states like Kansas and Kentucky over the issue of abortion. So this is a decision that should be made by voters in their states through their elected representatives and through their courts. And that's what happened in Alabama. And that's the way our federalist system works.
So, obviously you can see the backdrop there for those guys who are watching on YouTube or Rumble or on the First. But Mike, you've led this Article 3 project. As I said in the beginning, you were the head of nominations to the Senate Judiciary Committee. You know a ton about that. But you also are really into big tech. And I know today, obviously, I want to get into Trump and Hunter Biden and all this stuff. But I couldn't help but think, wow, what a perfect day to have you on, because the Supreme Court today has these two cases regarding big tech censorship and free speech. What's going on there, and what kind of an impact could this have?
Well, I guess the issue is whether states can outlaw social discrimination, viewpoint discrimination on social media platforms. We saw some conservative states say that it's not fair. You have these government-sponsored monopolists, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, the big tech monopolists. They get antitrust amnesty, or they did for many, many years. They get Section 230 immunity, which is government-sponsored speech. And the states are saying that you can't discriminate against conservatives and Christians and others with whom you disagree on these platforms. And so the big tech platforms have sued and said that these states are violating the platform's First Amendment rights. So that's going to be decided by the Supreme Court with oral argument today. I imagine that this will be a decision that comes out towards the end of June, at the end of their term, because it's probably going to be a controversial, divided decision. But it's very interesting. What's the limiting principle here for these big tech platforms? If a state can't outlaw viewpoint discrimination based upon First Amendment grounds, can a state outlaw racial discrimination in these private companies? Can a state outlaw gender discrimination in these private companies? Where does this end?
Right. And I think the other thing that's interesting is, I know like Utah and a couple other states have tried to limit how old you can be to get on them, right? Same way that they would do with maybe something else, another, everything from amusement parks. It says you have to be this tall. I don't know that that's always a state law, but my point is they get involved in age issues all the time. And so I don't know that this is directly related to this case, but it seems to me that it's a states' rights type of case that gives the states the ability to come in and say, we have the authority and the obligation maybe to look after the welfare of our citizens.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the people who are trying to protect big tech here are going to open up a Pandora's box with states not being able to enforce their discrimination laws outside of the social media viewpoint discrimination context.
If I hypothetically the states were to prevail in this, would this be something, I always think like in cars, you have the California emissions and a lot of times car makers will do things because it's like, well, if we're going to have to do this for California, we might as well do it for, the rest of the country. And I know like in the case of books, textbooks, Texas is like the largest purchaser of books. And so a lot of times the textbook companies will say, well, if Texas is making us do this with respect to these books, we might as well just do it for the rest of the country, right? If big tech has to follow the laws of California and Texas, Florida and Texas, where they were sued, if the states were to prevail, do you think that the social media companies would just make these adjustments nationwide, or would they try to just tailor them to those states?
I'm not, you're saying is there going to be like a California admissions standard that they use for social media? But the problem is that these social media platforms can geolocate their users, right?
Okay.
They know exactly where their users are. And they do this now in various countries. If you're in a country that doesn't allow certain things on their platforms, they block them. The social media companies will block those things on those platforms when you're in those countries. They know where your location is. I think it's not like the car companies where they'd have to build 50 different cars for 50 different states. It's very easy for the social media companies to micro-target you based upon your geolocation.
All right. Well, let's move into the legal world, because something that's really interesting this Friday, which kind of bums me out that it's a Friday, we're going to bury the news, but Hunter Biden's having this closed door testimony. What do you make of the evolution of a guy who, did press stunts outside the Capitol saying, I will not do anything not in public, to suddenly, okay, let's testify behind closed doors? How did this evolve to suddenly him caving to do this?
Well, I mean, I don't know how he could run from this. This is clearly within Congress's oversight role. If the president of the United States is compromised by tens of millions of dollars, they have $20 million so far. James Comer, the House Oversight Chairman, has bank records. Bank records don't lie. Bank records showing over $20 million going from these foreign entities in these foreign countries to just about every Biden family member, except for the 6-year-old granddaughter who they finally acknowledged under political pressure. And you have to wonder, what were the Bidens selling for $20 million? Was it Hunter's artwork? Was it Joe Biden's brains? I mean, what the hell were the Bidens selling other than Joe Biden as the brand and public corruption?
The thing that blows me away, right, is I know you're joking about this, but you're right. Who was it? Hunter's wife or Jim's kids or whatever. Everyone's getting money. And no one in the media says, doesn't that seem a little fishy that like the kids and everyone else is getting payrolled by these Chinese companies? And no one says, gosh, what's it for? Maybe that's an obvious question.
I mean, this is obviously a bribery scheme. It's obviously a foreign corruption scheme. You're dealing with bribery statutes. You're dealing with disclosure statutes. You're dealing with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. There is no explanation, no good explanation for why over $20 million went to almost every Biden, right?
This is amazing.
They're not selling anything.
The whole thing to me, I get it's like sometimes when you're watching a movie and they're joking, they're like, you can see the blood coming from like a door, and they're like, I don't know, maybe that could be an answer, and we should. But it's so blatantly obvious what's going on here, and yet everyone in the media goes, well, there's no evidence, and it's like, what are you talking about? This company is paying them off, and to people who admit that they didn't do anything, and no one seems interested. And yet during the Trump administration, it was like, okay, Don had a coffee at a place where 2 Russian dudes had a coffee the week before. They probably left a note, and that note was there was this attempt to make everything nefarious and horrible. And yet here we have literally a money trail, and everyone's like, yeah, I don't see what you're seeing here.
Yeah. Remember what the Democrats did to President Trump? It was the Obama administration, the Obama General Services Administration that leased the old post office building in Washington, D.C., which was a rundown rat hole dump.
Yeah.
And Trump turned it into one of the best hotels in the world. And the Democrats said that this was somehow corruption, that President Trump got this General Service Administration contract from the Obama administration long before he was president, became the president. Somehow that's corruption. Trump ended up selling his hotel to the Waldorf Astoria for a tremendous profit because he actually built things. He built real estate. He sold real estate. He actually built a real estate empire. What's the Biden's family business? It's corruption. They're selling America's secret. They're selling access to these foreign countries. They're doing this corruptly, illegally.
All right, folks, if you're a longtime watcher of the show, you know about my friend Leo Grillo. He rescued a Doberman years ago, named the dog Delta. Delta stands for dedication and everlasting love to animals. That was the beginning of what became Delta Rescue. DeltaRescue.org is where you can see the videos of the great work that they're doing. They provide nutrition, veterinarian care to allow animals to roam free in their sanctuary. Not a shelter. It's a no-kill, the largest no-kill sanctuary in the world. These animals can roam free. They have a home for life because of the work that Leo Grillo has done. And he needs our help. It's through our contributions, $5, $10, $100, $1,000, whatever you can spare, to make sure that Delta Rescue can provide these services. But more than that, if you go on the website, deltarescue.org, you can see the videos, but you can also see the estate planning kit. And if you're an animal lover like I am, you've rescued a dog, a cat, whatever, you can go on this estate planning kit and make it part of your enduring mission so that Leo's dream continues for life and that these animals will always have a place to get the care that they need. Please go to deltarescue.org, check out that estate planning kit and see if you can help. So this is so off topic, but I got to tell you this story because I think it's funny. So back in the late 90s, 97 to 2000, maybe a little somewhere in there, there was a charitable organization that I belonged to. And we had a New Year's gala every year to raise money for a particular charity, and it would rotate, whatever, that doesn't matter. And we would rent out the old post office. To your point about this being this ratty old place, it had in the basement this food court, and it literally, to your description, was spot on. We would rent it out and throw parties there. And I have this picture of the board of this charity organization standing on the steps that go down if you've ever been in the hotel. And I'm touring the hotel prior to it being open with then candidate Trump. And we're walking around and I said, man, this is beautiful what you've done to the place. You know, I used to rent this place out on New Year's for this party. It was just, and he's looking at me like, and I just realized, okay, shut up, Sean. Like, but it really was this ratty old place that we got a deal on to throw a charity event on New Year's, because it had a food court in the basement that was seedy. And by the way, the Waldorf Astoria, there's a story, I think it's in This Morning, they're losing a ton of money. Trump made that great, made money, and yet it just shows that these guys will go after him for nothing. But he really did, A, make it great, and B, realized how to make money out of it when no one else could. It's the same thing like that rink in New York City, the Waldorf or the Walden rink or whatever it's called, that he came in, fixed, and made it successful. These guys get so pissed that he actually knows how to do business. It's totally off topic, but I thought I'd share that with you. But here's my question for you, or my theory on the Hunter Biden thing, and I want to get your take on this. See, I think that they watched Peter Navarro, the DOJ. They're sentencing Peter Navarro for not complying with the January 6th unselect ridiculous committee, and they're sending him to jail. Okay. So tell me if my theory makes any sense to you. And I think what started to happen is that Abby Lowell, who is Hunter Biden's attorney, realized, oh boy, they're sending Peter Navarro to jail for this ridiculous thing on January 6th committee. If we don't comply with an actual legitimate committee in Congress, how's DOJ not going to be able, they're going to have to do something with this. It's going to put Daddy Biden in a very difficult position because he keeps saying, he's publicly said you have to comply with subpoenas. And so how is Joe Biden and his DOJ going to deal with his own son when they were very, very supportive of going after people like Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon?
Yeah, I mean, that's how the justice system should work. And maybe that factored into their calculation. But I actually think President Biden is going to pardon Hunter and pardon James, his brother, and pardon every Biden family member, pardon himself before he leaves office on January 20th, 2025 before President Trump is sworn in. But you're right, it creates a political problem for Joe Biden before the presidential election on November 5th of this year, that Joe Biden and his Biden Justice Department are going after not only Peter Navarro, but Steve Bannon, two top presidential advisors. Peter Navarro, as you know, Sean, was the trade director, a very senior advisor. Bannon was the counselor to the president, and then he was an outside presidential advisor. Executive privilege applies to both presidential advisors inside the White House and outside the White House. There's a clear Office of Legal Counsel, or OLC, legal opinion on this at the Justice Department. But the Biden Justice Department, Joe Biden and Merrick Garland and the Biden Justice Department, are ignoring all of this precedent. They're ignoring 250 years of executive privilege because their goal is to get Trump, because they fear that they can't beat him on November 5th, 2024. So they just want to impeach him and indict him and imprison him and bankrupt him and silence him and disqualify him. And that's all going to backfire. And we're going to see President Trump back in the White House on January 20th, 2025, just as we predicted at the Article 3 project for the last 20 months when we've defended Trump since day one.
Oh, yeah. By the way, it's funny. I mean, I know that from at least the stuff that I read and the people I talk to, he has been very laudatory towards you and the Article 3 project for the work that you've done and for your personal comments. And I know you and I have talked about this before, so I won't waste time asking. But your name still keeps getting floated as like a top person because he recognizes the talent that you are, the insight that you bring, and also the work that you've been doing. So I'll leave it at that because I know you and I have talked about this before. Let me just kind of put a pin in the Hunter Biden thing, because was it like a week ago, this FBI informant recanted and now they're prosecuting him. And the case was that he was critical to this impeachment of Joe Biden. When we think about the Hunter Biden testimony this Friday, how critical is it to making the case for impeachment? Because I didn't see anything bombshell come out of the Jim Biden testimony, which I don't think is crazy to expect because the guy's going to plead the fifth or obfuscate like they've always done. So how important is the testimony this Friday from Hunter Biden to the overall case to impeach Joe Biden?
I think it will help, but I don't think it's critical because they have James Comer has the bank records showing over $20 million going from foreign countries that are opposed to the United States, like China, through their foreign entities, these CCP front groups, to every single, just what seems like every single Biden except for the 6-year-old granddaughter who they finally claimed, right? You can't explain that. That is the only explanation for that is corruption. It is clear family corruption on a massive scale. The president of the United States is compromised by these corrupt foreign payments and their cover-up. And you cannot have a compromised president of the United States. And people say, well, he took this money before he's president, so it's not impeachable. That is a stupid argument, because that would mean you could not get rid of a compromised president of the United States based upon taking foreign bribes and other corruption before he became president.
If you're looking to secure your financial future, there's no better place than talking to my friends at Bishop Gold Group. If you go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean, S-E-A-N, for those of you who don't know how to spell it correctly, you can find out what Bishop Gold Group can do to help you with an old IRA, a 401k, or just to start your journey with precious metals and make an additional investment. I've done it. I called them. I had a conversation with them. If you want to call because you don't want to go online, dial 844-984-1616. Tell them that Sean sent you. You get a free promotional gift with that call, or going online, bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean, right? This is where you can begin your journey and expand your investment portfolio to include precious metals. Like I said, I did it. You get hit up all the time. I know it. I see the commercials for this group or that group. But the folks at Bishop Gold Group are the people that I trust, the people that when I invested in precious metals, I called them. I had a discussion about what was best for me that met my needs. You can do the same. Go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean and begin your journey like I did with precious metals as part of your investment portfolio. All right, let's break down some of these Trump cases. The Fani Willis thing in Georgia. Can you explain to the audience, like, we were captive. I shouldn't. We were. I was captivated last week on cable television with this Nathan Wade testimony versus Fonnie Willis. How much cash they used. I mean, I felt like we were back in the O.J. Simpson days. I used to remember just sitting there. I had a television on my desk when I was a low-level staffer working in the Senate, and we would just sit there and watch the O.J. Simpson trial play out. And I haven't had any experience like it since then. When I'm sitting there watching this, like her talk about how much cash she keeps in her wallet, and how she paid him, and what black people do with their money versus white people, and men versus women. I mean, the whole thing to me was somewhat silly, but also very intriguing. Break down for me what it meant legally.
Well, think about the allegations against Fannie Willis. She hired her secret boyfriend, who's not qualified, to be the special prosecutor to prosecute a former president and likely future president, along with 18 others, including his supporters and aides and lawyers. She paid him $250 an hour out of Fulton County taxpayer money, including federal COVID funds that Fulton County has gotten. She's paid him over $700,000 or nearly $700,000 in counting. And she forgot to tell everyone it was her boyfriend. And then she lied about.
Do you think that's a big deal? Just because you're sleeping with the person, they're your boyfriend. You think you really have to disclose that?
Well, I mean, it's a clear conflict of interest legally and ethically. But here's the bigger problem. She took illegal kickbacks from her boyfriends, who she paid $250 an hour, $700,000 in counting, to bring this bogus RICO lawsuit based upon a bogus legal theory against the political opponent of the ruling regime. And she paid Nathan Wade to go meet with the Biden White House, including the Biden White House counsel, before she brought this unprecedented indictment. And so she has an illegal financial stake in this criminal prosecution. As a prosecutor, you cannot have a criminal stake in the criminal prosecution because you don't want to incentivize prosecutors financially to bring bogus RICO charges with 18 defendants. That's going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money and create a financial incentive to go after someone and imprison them to line your pockets. And so that is absolutely illegal. She should be disqualified from this case. Clearly, this case should get dismissed, and they should bring in a new prosecutor to evaluate whether to rebring these charges. They need to not only disqualify Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade, but they need to disqualify the entire Fulton County DA's office. Here's a problem. Fannie Willis lied to several courts, right? Nathan Wade lied to several courts. Nathan Wade submitted a false affidavit perjury to the divorce court, and then Fannie Willis took that affidavit and submitted it in response to co-defendant Mike Roman's motion to dismiss. And so you have Nathan Wade lying to the divorce court, and then Fannie Willis, Nathan Wade, and then they got 8 other attorneys in the Fulton County's office to sign on to this brief where Nathan Wade and Fannie Willis knew that they were lying and got these 8 attorneys in their office to put their careers on the line by submitting this false affidavit to the court in the Trump proceeding. And so they've committed perjury several times. It's subornation of perjury. It's obstruction of justice. It's, that you have gift ban violations. You have bribery problems, bribery allegations. There's no question that Governor Brian Kemp down in Georgia and Attorney General Chris Carr down in Georgia must open a criminal probe on Fannie Willis, because they've clearly violated the law, and they've clearly done it in the most dangerous way, which is to weaponize the justice system against the leading presidential candidate and his supporters. That is like third world Marxist hellhole banana republic tactics, and that can't stand in this country. So Governor Kemp and Attorney General Chris Carr, who are cowards and hate Trump, may actually have to do their jobs.
So let me just ask you, when I was watching this whole thing play out, I saw Fonnie Willis testify, I saw Nathan Wade testify. There's the judge that was sitting there, right? And then there was like, I don't know, 5 to 8 defendants, if you will, all these people. How does this play out? Does the judge just make a ruling and says that Fonnie Willis is removed, or like what's the procedure and the timeline moving forward as far as how does that play out? You mentioned for example, that she should be removed from the case? Does the judge rule on that? Or what is the judge actually ruling on? And then how does that all go forward?
If this judge is actually doing his job, he would disqualify Fannie Willis. He would disqualify Nathan Wade. He would disqualify the entire Fulton County DA office. He would dismiss the case, and he would allow Georgia. There's a commission they have on prosecutors. They would allow Georgia to decide whether to bring in a new prosecutor, and whether that new prosecutor in a new office outside of Fulton County would refile these charges against Trump and 18 others. I seriously doubt any sane prosecutor, especially one who doesn't have a financial stake in this criminal prosecution, would refile these charges, because it's a bogus legal theory. It's not illegal to object to a presidential election.
So would all those defendants then get off, all of them at the same time?
Yes.
And not okay. And
yes,
so
including the ones who have pled guilty. This is a corrupt prosecution. Those would all go away. All those charges would go away.
So the Jenna Ellises and whomever, like all those people.
That's what should happen. But here's the problem, Sean. You have this very young judge who is a Kemp appointee. He worked for Fannie Willis in the before in a prior job. He donated $150 to Fannie Willis's Fulton County DA campaign.
What?
And he looked intimidated at that hearing. Even when Fannie Willis was dominating that hearing and running her big, loud mouth, he would not even look at her when he gently chided her to stop, stop being in contempt of court and shut your mouth and let the judge.
See, I didn't realize that. Okay. So two things. One, when do we expect him to rule? Because it just seemed to me that this didn't. I don't know. I felt like if it's just the judge, why didn't he just take a day and say, okay, here's my ruling? But secondly, knowing what you just told me, which is holy smokes, what would be the opposite? He says, I didn't see a problem that can move forward.
Look, this is such a clear-cut case for disqualification of Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade and the Fulton County DA's office. It's also a very strong case to dismiss these charges because they've been tainted with Fannie Willis's financial stake in this criminal prosecution since before its inception, before the indictment. She admitted that she started dating Nathan Wade before the indictment, regardless of when she actually started dating Nathan Wade. She lied about it. She dated her personal assistant, who was her friend, said she's been dating Nathan Wade going back to 2019, this married man that Fannie Willis destroyed his marriage. And there's evidence, there's cell phone data showing that Nathan Wade went to Fannie Willis's house many, many, many times in 2021. There's cell phone evidence of like 12,000 text messages and 2,000 phone calls in the first 11 months of 2021 before Fannie Willis testified she started dating Nathan Wade in November of 21. She's clearly lying. Nathan Wade is clearly lying. They're clearly corrupt here. They've clearly violated their ethical responsibilities as lawyers and prosecutors, and they violated criminal law. There must be accountability here, and it needs to come from this Kemp judge or Governor Kemp or Attorney General Chris Carr. Look, if they let Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade skate by with these crimes, then they are playing into this two systems of justice run by Democrats and their uniparty Republican enablers.
So let me just ask what I asked a minute ago. When do you expect a ruling?
Whenever this judge rules. I mean, I think he has to rule before the case can proceed because there's clearly due process, including federal due process violations with Fannie Willis having a financial stake in a criminal prosecution. You can't get more corrupt than that as a criminal prosecutor. So
when I watch TV court cases, sometimes they'll say, well, the jury came back with a quick decision. That's good or bad. What does it mean that it's taking him several days? Like I said, as a non-lawyer, I'm like, he heard the testimony. Why does it take a long time? Is it that he's researching the legal basis for his decision? Like, why can't he? I mean, is that a good sign or a bad sign?
Well, I mean, imagine he's going to do his research, and I imagine he's going to have to put out a detailed opinion here. This is a big decision to disqualify an elected DA and her office. It's a big decision whether to dismiss the case. I think that the law is going to compel him to disqualify Fani Willis and Nathan Wade in the office and likely dismiss the case, because if he doesn't, this whole case is going to get thrown out on appeal. And I guess you have to ask this judge, do you want a criminal conviction of a presidential candidate down in Fulton County, Georgia, before he's elected president, which could affect the outcome of the presidential election, knowing that that criminal conviction is going to get tossed out because of the clear due process violations by Fani Willis and Nathan Wade?
Okay. So I need to cover two more legal things, and I know we're coming. I want to talk about this decision up in New York that Letitia James went after Trump. The ruling, the judge that, what's his name? Arthur Engoron. Engoron, yeah, $453 million. Letitia James is like trolling Trump on Twitter. It's $87,000 a day in interest alone. I didn't realize this. While he likely appeals, he still has to make a payment towards this. So walk me through the legal piece of this. I didn't realize like you're making the appeal and yet you still have to pay and that there's interest on it. That doesn't seem like due process to me. That seems like you're guilty and you have to start paying, and you have to start paying the interest on it.
Yeah. So this Democrat New York Attorney General Tish James, who campaigned on the fact that she was going to get Trump and Congresswoman Elise Stefanik from New York filed an ethics complaint on this. Tish James made over 50 unethical, illegal, extrajudicial comments about President Trump's guilt during the first 5 weeks of this trial, which is clearly unethical. Let's just see if the New York Democrat judicial system has any ethics itself and will actually do anything to hold Tish James accountable for this. You had Tish James go to this Democrat Manhattan judge, Arthur Engoron, and they ruled that Trump somehow committed fraud before the trial even began, before any witnesses or any other evidence, that Trump somehow committed fraud when he paid back sophisticated Wall Street banks in full, on time, as agreed, with interest. The bank showed up to his trial and said that Trump's a great customer. We'd love to have him again. No one was defrauded here, but Tish James and this Democrat judge, with this Democrat judge's law clerk who sat on the bench with him, who donated to Schumer and as a Schumer buddy, colluded to impose this fine without a jury, just impose this, $450 million fine, essentially to take away all Trump's money, his cash reserves, before the election.
See, that's the thing that I've tried to say to people is that, like, look, 2016, it was Russia hoax, the Steele dossier. 2020, the suppression, big tech coming after Trump, and then you suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop. This time, it's like, hey guys, gloves are off. We're coming at Trump with everything we got. We're going to take him off the ballot. We're going to prosecute him criminally, and we're going to go after him financially and bankrupt him. I mean, this is a full frontal assault.
Yeah, and I think the response needs to be in the Trump 47 Justice Department. The Attorney General needs to open up a probe on all of this, a civil rights probe. And I think that there is a criminal civil rights conspiracy to deprive people of their civil rights, including President Trump of his civil rights, and all these other people in the Trump orbit who are being ensnarled in this conspiracy by Joe Biden with these criminal prosecutions. Joe Biden's hands are on every single one of these criminal prosecutions. It was Matthew Colangelo who got sent from the Biden Justice Department as the number 3 office as a senior political appointee to bring the unprecedented criminal indictment against President Trump, the first indictment ever by Soros-funded Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg for the non-felony of settling a nuisance claim. And Alvin Bragg, the prior Manhattan DA, the Federal Election Commission, the Manhattan U.S. Attorney, and Alvin Bragg himself passed over on this bogus legal theory. And it wasn't until Matthew Colangelo got sent from the Biden Justice Department to resuscitate this zombie case. They brought this indictment. That is going to trial starting in March, like March 25th. That's going to be the first one out of the gates. And then you have the Biden White House, Deputy White House Counsel Jonathan Sue, waiving President Trump's claim of executive privilege. President Biden waived President Trump's claim of executive privilege with the National Archives, which led to the unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful home raid on President Trump for presidential records he's allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. And that led to Jack Smith and Jack Smith's indictment in Mar-a-Lago and the January 6th indictment. And then you have Nathan Wade billing the Fulton County DA's office $250 an hour for his meetings with the Biden White House, including the Biden White House counsel, before Fani Willis's indictment of President Trump. So this is lawfare, and it's being coordinated, organized by President Biden and the Biden White House. And it shouldn't surprise you, because remember, it was Biden who leaked to friendly reporters that he's mad at Merrick Garland for being too much of a professor and not going after Trump. And then lo and behold, we started to see these raids and these indictments against President Trump.
You know, it's funny. Every once in a while in the comments, after like tonight on YouTube, right? I'll look at the comments from this video and people would say, Sean, why do you keep sucking up to President Trump? And I'm like, first of all, this has nothing to do with Trump. This has to do with the rule of law. This has to do with the Constitution. If you don't see, like you can, and no, people will be like, he's done this. He's been his whole life. This isn't about your whole life. That's when you go up to the pearly gates and meet St. Peter and you're accountable to him and to God. This is not how our legal system works. So you get to prosecute someone because you don't like them. He didn't commit something. This is like blatant lawfare. I have two more things that I want to ask you about. So in like a minute. One of the big things, like we saw yesterday or Saturday night and tomorrow's Michigan, that Nikki Haley's staying in the race. And one of the big theories that the media makes is, well, in case something happens to Trump, like he gets convicted. Based on the cases that exist right now, take the political piece out of this for a second. Just answer me this question. What is the likelihood that Trump gets convicted of any case before the convention? And if so, which one?
There's a chance that he could get convicted by Soros-funded Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg's bogus campaign finance felony case, non-felony case up in New York. But that is such a laughably stupid case for the Democrats. It's like, that's what the Michael Avenatti case for their lawfare. It's so stupid of them to start with that case because it's going to undermine what they're doing on the other cases. The strongest case they have is the obstruction case against Trump in Mar-a-Lago. But I would argue that there's no obstruction there because you can't obstruct justice for the investigation of non-crimes. And there's a 2019 OLC binding opinion on the Justice Department on that. Jack Smith clearly didn't follow that binding opinion at the Justice Department, but that case is not going to go to trial before none of these other cases will get to trial before the election because they're tied up in court proceedings.
Okay. The last question I have for you is in your previous life wheelhouse. Chris LaCivita, who is one of the top strategists for Trump, said that who is now tapped to go over the RNC to help run the day-to-day operations there, said the RNC's sole mission is to take back the White House. And with all due respect to Chris, I don't think it's the sole mission. It may be the top mission, because if you don't have a Senate, you don't get your people in places. As the guy that ran the nominations, explain how important it is to have a Republican Senate in 60 seconds.
It's make or break for the Trump presidency. President Trump was able to confirm a record number of judges in his first term, thanks to my former boss, Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley, along with Mitch McConnell. They were able to do this when I was the chief counsel for nominations because we controlled the Senate. We had to break a lot of China to get Trump's judges through. But if Trump does not win the Senate, he's not going to get any of his agenda passed. He won't be able to confirm his nominees to the executive branch or federal judges.
Thank you for saying that. To me, this is critical. No Senate, no people, no House, no policy. And in fact, when we lost the House, he got impeached twice. Like the downstream matters. Mike Davis, always love your insight, sharing your knowledge with us, because you explain it in a way that no other one can, and I don't have a law degree. So thank you for what you do, both in terms of big tech and the Article 3 project. For everyone else, guys, thank you for being here and kicking off your week with us. I appreciate everyone who was with the live event last night with us on YouTube and other platforms. Stay with us all this week. Dr. Ben Carson is joining us. Dave Rubin. We've got a big week ahead. The Michigan primary is tomorrow. Super Tuesday is coming up in a week. A lot to break down. Stay with us. Subscribe, share. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.